Welcome, geeks, to another exciting episode of Rockin The Code World with dotNetDave. I'm David McCarter. I'm glad you're all back. I hope you're all doing okay. Half of Americans right now are in a winter advisory, which doesn't always happen. So I find that interesting. Half of Americans are under weather problems. And we have a new storm hitting San Diego this afternoon, so that means the rest of the country will get it starting tonight or tomorrow. So those of you living east of San Diego, get ready. The snow's coming your way. How y'all been doing? What you been up to? I'm cutting out early today because I'm playing in a band now. Last week was my first practice. Today's the second practice. And this is actually my bass guitar, which you guys haven't seen yet. The bass player for the band, you're not going to believe this, but she was in her garage and a car plowed into her garage and crushed her shoulder. So right now I'm sitting in on bass until she recovers, which hopefully will be in a couple weeks. It happened last month. So I'm looking forward to that. Let me know what you guys are doing fun this weekend besides programming. Also speaking about the weather, I was watching the news this morning, and please be safe out there when you're on the road. If you don't need to be on the road, don't go on the road. Losing your life just to go, down the street is not worth it. And, I saw this video of this car trying to pass a tractor trailer. And right as it almost passed it, a snow plow went right into the car, and that was it. So please be safe out there if you're dealing with, this snowy, icy weather. I was lucky enough. I grew up, I learned how to drive in the snow, so I think I'm probably a little bit better than most people. But even with that knowledge, I prefer not to drive in the snow even when I'm in it. So please be safe out there. So anyway, it's show 95. I can't believe we've done 95 shows, Simon. I can't believe that number sometimes. Anyway, today I have back on the show Brady Gaster from Microsoft, and he's going to be talking about Aspire. I'm really interested in this show because I really don't know much about Aspire, and I've kind of been holding back on learning because I wanted to hear from an expert first and learn all the cool things that Aspire is going to help us developers with. So I'm going to be learning along with you today. So I like shows like that. And Brady, also I got asked to speak in Poland this year. I'm really excited about that. Unfortunately, they don't pay for travel, so I'm going to be doing it virtually. But even with that, I'm excited to speak in Poland virtually. So that'll be later this year. So excited about that. Oh, I forgot to click to see the snowflakes. All right. We got some tech news today, this week. .NET MAUI Community Toolkit it now works, for .NET 8, which is pretty cool. The other big tech news I heard this morning was a bunch of executives at Microsoft got their emails hacked. So I don't know if that's huge news, but it's why I personally am very protective about my phone number and things like that because hackers. That's all. I wish hackers would turn their talent for good. I don't get the whole hacking thing, but anyway. Also, I'm super excited that my new book came out at the beginning of the year. Rock Your Code Coding Standards for Microsoft.NET. It's the biggest book I've ever written by myself. It's 560 pages. It's freaking heavy, and And I hope you go pick up a copy. This is the proof copy. I don't have the real copy yet. I'm waiting for it to come in, but I hope you go pick up a copy. I worked a big portion of last year on this book. It's got 230 new pages in it, tons of more information, tons of more standards, and things like that to get your team jump started. If you don't have coding standards out there, getting jump started on good coding standards. Have been around for .NET ever since it came out, and because we need to write code that looks like, you know, if Bob wrote code, it should look like my code, right? Because it makes it much more easier to maintain and add features and things like that to later on down the road. And of course, because I'm really big into performance, I put a lot of information about performance in my coding standards book too. So I hope you go pick up a copy. It's on sale right now for this month. So pick it up now, because starting next month, because of the printing cost of this big freaking thing, I'm going to have to up the cost 10 US dollars. So, but anyway, I hope you get a copy of the cheaper version this month. And then, so now I want to welcome Brady. Brady works with the amazing folks at Microsoft Developer Division who builds SignalR, Orleans, minimal APIs, and various Azure services to bring delightful experiences to .NET developers who want to party in the cloud. When Brady's not learning with or from his two sons, so I guess his sons are hackers already, hacking on samples, demos, telling stories with code, he's probably in the studio making music in various analog synthesizers and guitars. Welcome, Brady.
Hey, how's it going? Doing all right?
Hey.
It's great to be back.
Yeah, I'm glad you're back. And I remembered when I was reading your bio this morning that you also are a musician. And so, one of the things I've been wanting to do, which maybe I think I'll do for season 5, is I kind of want to re-record the bass track on my intro song. And, something I wanted in the intro song when I first recorded it was organ. And so I thought, oh, Brady can do that. I wanted an organ in the song, kind of like the Deep Purple sound.
Oh,
right?
That's cool.
The Hammond B3, kind of slightly distorted, a Deep Purple organ sound.
Oh yeah.
I just love that sound for some reason,
It's a great sound.
Yeah, Deep Purple. I mean, the organ, I forget his name, but the organist in Deep Purple is just phenomenal, one of a kind of person.
Yeah, he's fantastic. That's the second time that's come up this week. I guess it's my purple background. The other day I was chatting with another gent who's he's also a synth enthusiast. He's one of my fantastic vendors at Microsoft. He works on a lot of the content we'll talk about today, in fact. And we were chatting the other day, and he's really into jazz guitar. So we've talked a lot about jazz, and he sent me some of his pieces, and I'm like, my stuff sounds nothing like that. It actually sounds like you thought about your work.
Yeah, because some jazz you don't really think about, right? It's just it's kind of like speed metal, right? It doesn't make much sense to anybody.
That's cool.
And but speaking about music, and then we'll move off. Otherwise, I'll just talk about music the whole freaking time.
We can do that.
Last night, because my Disney Plus subscription, I canceled my Disney Plus because I've watched everything on the freaking thing. Last night, I watched the farewell concert of Elton John at Dodger Stadium.
Nice.
That Disney streamed live 2 years ago when it happened, and it was their first live streaming event that Disney Plus did, and I kind of I don't know about you, but I feel like any musician who plays in Vegas, I feel that's the end of their career, and they're just phoning it in, and just to make their last bit of money before they totally go out of fame, right? And so I was going, oh, okay, I'll watch it, and if it's not good within the first couple songs, I'll just bail and go watch a movie. Oh my gosh, I was glued to the TV the entire time.
That's
like
cool.
5 songs in, I was getting goosebumps.
That's cool.
Elton John is, I mean, when he recorded this movie, he was 75, right? And he can belt out the lyrics like nobody,
That's
right?
cool.
And he just played like he's, Elton John has always had a really unique style of playing, right? Which
Oh, yeah,
I've always really liked because it's really unique. But I just can't believe a 75-year-old and the rest of it. He has most of the original band members there,
yeah,
right?
wacky.
And they're all like freaking old, and
Yeah,
they were all just like on fire,
that's
you
cool.
know.
That's cool.
And I was going, these old guys are so much better than most of the young, bands out these days,
Oh yeah,
right?
we actually I had a text conversation with one of our mutual friends, Hunter, the other day,
Yeah,
Scott Hunter,
yeah.
and we were texting about work and stuff. And there's this picture of he and I. We always joke about this picture. A couple of years back, we went to the Mark Knopfler concert here
Yeah.
at the Chateau Saint Michel. It's a winery. And they have these fantastic concerts. We've also seen Steve Winwood there, AC/DC there. They were pretty good.
Yeah.
But we went and saw Mark Knopfler there, and we had this great picture of us together, and it was really funny. Like, it was one of the concerts. Hunter and I've seen a lot of bands together, and it was one of the shows that we went to where we actually we didn't feel old.
Yeah. But that's
man, Mark can still tear apart. He's an amazing musician. All of his band, he had a couple of older guys there as well. He's still jamming. So
yeah.
I still love to check out Mark Knopfler. He's my favorite guitar player. So.
Yeah. Well, at the concert the Elton John concert, they showed pictures of the crowd. And of course, there's literally every freaking age there, including kids, rocking out. There were some 20 somethings mouthing the songs like they've been listening to them for 40 years. Right.
That's cool.
And I was going, wow, that's just, I get the older people know the songs, right? But the younger ones are even, lip syncing the songs and really enthusiastic and dressed up weirdo like Elton John and everything.
Oh yeah.
And,
yeah. I mean, it's just timeless music.
It is.
You mentioned Vegas. One of the trips I did to Vegas, we were actually going to see. We're going out there to see Thievery Corporation. If you know anything about that. And we the night before Thievery Corporation, we went to the Beatles thing, the Love.
The Love
show.
I love that. I've seen it twice.
Yeah, it's great. And it was myself and my wife and two of our friends from college, and half of us, let me put it that way, half of us were really into the Beatles. The other half were kind of like, well, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
We went to Love. We left. All four of us were Beatle fans. And it was funny. Like at one point, I'll say it. The two of us that weren't Beatles fans before that moment looked at each other, and one of us was like, I've always thought, and I know this isn't right, I've always thought it sounds like everything else. You know what I mean? And then we turned to each other, and we said that on the way into the show.
Right.
And when we were leaving the show, we turned to each other, and one of us said, "It's that everything else sounds like that."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we figured out at that show, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. So many of those chord progressions, so many of those sounds, so many of that stuff, they did it first.
Yeah.
And it's like when you go and you see it, kind of it's very inspiring. It's
yeah.
This is where this all started. Those guys.
Yeah, I actually saw the Beatles Love Show with the original cast, and the first time I saw it, I don't know how this happened, but I got front row, and one of the aerobatic people that were flying in the air, part of her costume fell off right in front of me, so I kept it, and cool. It's probably still around here somewhere. That's pretty cool. And that's if you go to Vegas and if you like music, you have to go see the Beatles Love Show. That is just it's the best show I've ever seen in Vegas. Yeah.
Funny music fact given the week. I think it's this Tuesday. I can't remember what actual day of the week it was. But one day this week, 50, 60 years ago, one of the Beatles purchased a analog synth like this.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And I believe it was a Moog.
A Moog? Yeah. Yeah. I love those.
Yeah. I learned that from my Bob Moog calendar. So and I talked to Damien about it and this week, and he was like, "Yeah, that was George." George was the geek of the group.
He was he was the one trying to really push different kind of sounds, and especially with the guitar and things like that. And if you watch that super long documentary about the Beatles, right, the one that's called Get Back, right, you can really see some of that happening, right, if you watch that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So we have somebody, Diego says, let's go .NET. So
Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm sorry.
Sorry, we're
We're geeking out on music. I was going to limit it to 15 after, and so we hit it. So let's go. Let's talk about Aspire.
Yeah, I'll actually tie these two threads together. There's a dev on the team. He's fantastic. His name is Diego. I know you always ask me for advice on people to bring in. You should bring in Diego. You guys can talk about music and .NET together. Yeah, I'll give you his last name offline. But there's a fantastic dev on the team. He worked on .NET Interactive and a whole bunch of other cool things. Traditional.
Oh yeah, I'm always looking for guests.
Yeah, when you see his setup, you're gonna lose it. So, okay. .NET Aspire. Actually, just to make sure I got all the words right, I actually pulled up the docs here, and I'll share that off in the YouTube chat over here. And I shared the English version. My apologies. But we have it translated in many languages. .NET Aspire is essentially this development stack around building, cloud native applications with .NET. It kind of started, last year. We've been working with a lot of service teams. If you think about the number of services, pieces of software that you use at Microsoft that you don't actually install, you just kind of open your browser and you party on it. Those are big cloud scale services. You're one of a bajillion people using that same application at that moment in time. A lot of those folks use .NET. A lot of those services that are built internally at Microsoft use .NET. There's a couple of reasons for that. Hey, .NET's awesome. I mean, come on, we're here, right? .NET's not only great, but those teams know that they can come to the .NET team and they can say, hey, we tried this thing with the Semaphore Slim or whatever, and something's wrong. And we'll be like, okay, we'll fix it. So we collaborate with those teams pretty deeply to kind of try to make .NET better for those big scale services. And then we give it to the teams, and the teams come back and they go, this was good, this wasn't good. You move the cheese over here, blah, blah, blah. So we've learned a lot. One of the things I talked about at Build last year, as a for instance, if you've ever done anything on Bing or any of our properties where you happen to see a Bing ad, or if you're using a mobile application that, they're using Bing ads in the background, or Microsoft advertising, if you will, that entire solution is built on .NET. They needed to be able to scale to like millions and millions, if not billions, of hits a day. All the different ads, all the different things that we circulate on all of our sites, as well as any other site that happens to use that ad layer. If that's not cloud native enough for you, think about the proxy. The front door ARR, if you will, is what it used to be for Azure App Service. I can't remember the numbers, but we're talking billions with a B. In terms of like all the different web applications, all the different functions, everything that would sit behind their front door proxy. One of the things that, they came to us and they said, we kind of want to improve this. And we know you have this thing that you wrote in the team called YARP, yet another reverse proxy. They actually took YARP and a lot of our core tech and, ASP.NET Core, and they replaced their front door with YARP and the stuff that we wrote for them, and they saw a big uptick in performance, big uptick in output, et cetera, et cetera. So we've been building .NET Core for the last few releases, all the way back to 2 or 3, with the idea of cloud native in mind. You can run .NET on Linux. That was the first move. Docker containers, second move. Containers without having to have Docker to actually build your .NET image into a container, third move, et cetera, et cetera. So we've made a lot of these moves over the years. But with .NET 8, we knew we wanted to kind of make it easier. So that's kind of where we have .NET Aspire. Now, .NET Aspire kind of was born out of some of the other projects that we were working on. There was a project called, I think the internal name was Rejuvenate, or something like that. We had a bunch of libraries, a bunch of packages that we shipped, throughout the preview cycle of .NET 8. And as we started shipping those, we started hearing from a lot of customers, mainly MVPs. I'm going to say it right. You're giving us all the let go bricks, but you didn't give us any instructions. So we kind of want you to give us, like, how do we use all this stuff together? There's all these fantastic new NuGet packages, but we don't know how to use them together. So what Aspire did was it kind of took some of those concepts and distilled them down into, more consumable APIs, as well as, when you do file a new project, Aspire, one of the things you get is a service defaults project. That service defaults project is not where you put your own shared code. That's where we put our opinionated code for you, because we know you might want to turn some of it on and off. So there's literally a set of extension methods in that service defaults project that comes along with an Aspire solution. that all of the projects would reference. If you right click, an existing ASP.NET Core project in VS, you can say, I want to orchestrate it with Aspire. If there's already an Aspire AppHost and service defaults project there, we'll just use it. If there's not, we'll drop them in for you.
Yeah.
And we'll wire up your projects to kind of use all those defaults. Those defaults are things like telemetry. You get all your observable telemetry and all the different meters we turn on for you. We do that again in those extension methods. So if you're not using, for instance, gRPC in your application, and we've turned on gRPC instrumentation, it's in the code. Just go comment that line of code out, and now you're not instrumenting gRPC anymore. You can also turn on and off resiliency. We stacked our resiliency stuff on top of the Poly libraries and collaborated with them to make it better. And then we've got a lot of health checks stuff. Like we've been building on the health checks, APIs in .NET Core since I think 3.1. I think it's the first time we shipped that. Maybe even 2.2. We've just been building on top of those things and kind of extending them as we've gone along. One thing we heard from folks was like, just take Stack Overflow Redis. If you've ever written a .NET Core application where you need to use Redis, there's a couple of steps in the beginning. Acquisition, right click, add dependency.
Right.
If you're getting started with Stack Exchange, you probably add one package, the Stack Exchange package. And then as you're building out your application, you'll learn, either through, some sort of accident or somebody telling you should have that you need to add health checks, and then you need to add resiliency, and then you need to add telemetry, and blah, 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 blah. So in Aspire, we have these things called Aspire components. So we might actually have, we have like the Stack Exchange Redis component for Aspire. When you essentially add that component to your project, we add the health checks, we add the resiliency, we add the telemetry, we give you an extension method, and all you have to type is add Redis. And now you're partying with Redis. We actually do all the injection. So somewhere, if you were to go into one of your minimal API methods or into, date myself to the code behind, one of your basic components or your pages, you can actually say inject, Redis client or whatever the thing is. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. Redis connection, Redis database. Yeah. You can just inject that and it will be there because all that .NET Aspire plumbing will just inject all those things into your middleware for you automatically.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just taking those defaults and like making them intelligent, turning on things that we know people need to be turned on. And then when you walk through the documentation, you also learn that we have this concept. I mentioned an AppHost project earlier. The AppHost project, if you've ever built, like a front end website that talks to a back end API or gRPC or both, then you have to like right click your solution. You have to order the things, and I work on the VS team. I can never remember if it's top down or I can't ever remember. So you don't worry about that with Aspire. Okay, you set your AppHost project to be your startup project, and you hit F5 on your keyboard, and everything spins up.
Yeah,
it spins up in the right order. The service discovery is all done for you. That we basically wire everything up with environment variables. If you were to look in the documentation, you'd see we have this concept of like service references in your AppHost project. You literally have a program CS in your AppHost project that kind of represents your entire application topology and all the different nodes. But I think one of the most compelling things, and I just read a little bit of docs on this week, is that F5 experience doesn't just like launch your front end web app or the Swagger UI page for your back end, or worse, 73 browser tabs for every web application in your solution. What it will do is it will actually launch what we call the dotNetAspire Dashboard. So that AppHost project essentially has a kind of a layer on top of it that we have a dashboard on top of that's written using the Fluent components for ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core. And all those basically spin up, and you get a view of all the containers. So if you're using Redis and Postgres in a container just for dev purposes, you'll see those listed in your resources list, as well as all of your ASP.NET Core projects or your worker projects. You'll see all those running as well. And you can click into each one and see the logs right there in the browser.
Wow.
Not only that, but we gave you the capability, if you've ever used something like Jaeger or Prometheus, to kind of see your distributed tracing. We give you all that inside the dashboard automatically. Now, this is dev time. One of the things we've heard from some customers, it would be great to have this in like an Azure environment. So we've toyed with the idea of like, you can already deploy that dashboard into say an Azure Container Apps environment and use that in your development environment to kind of see how everything's rolling. But where we really intend on that benefiting you is when you hit F5 and you want to see how service A is calling service B, baskets is calling catalogs and yada yada yada.
Yeah,
Your front end is calling everything. So all that like makes life a lot easier when you just want to kind of F5 and like see how everything's running. My favorite part of Aspire from the development experience part is I talked about this AppHost concept. In AppHost, this program CS, you can literally see like, here's my Redis database, here's my Postgres database, here's my couple backends, and then here's my front end. And like the backends might have service references to the Redis or the database, and the front end will have like service references to your APIs.
Right.
And to me, when I just open up that program CS, I can just kind of scan it and just go, oh, I can see my whole app like right here. But that's not the best part.
What's the best part?
The best part is like, what's great about building all these things? It's like you can hit F5 and you can see all the stuff and all that. But then you think to yourself, like, oh, I got to put this somewhere now. I got to deploy it. But we've made that really easy too. So the ASP.NET team, the .NET team has collaborated very deeply over the last year with another team in the developer division, the AZD team, the Azure Developer CLI. A lot of the devs over there, they dig .NET. They like writing, cloud native apps. And we've collaborated deeply with them because, one of the things that we know is .NET developers like writing .NET. They just like to write C#. I'll say C# because I'm a C# dev. No offense to F# and BBP. I just do C#. But you like to stay in C#. And the moment you have to get out of C#, like your muscle memories get a little rickety. The longer you're doing C#, the more you like to keep everything in there. So the idea of IAC, infrastructure as code, like writing Bicep or writing ARM templates or Terraform, those things can be a little intimidating for like, younger developers, people who aren't CI/CD enthusiasts or zealots like me. So thinking about shifting from Visual Studio and writing C# code and your application layer to thinking about how to deploy that stuff can be really daunting for a lot of devs. Right-click deploy this, right-click deploy that, right-click deploy this. It's not really how Cloud Native thinks. Cloud Native is like kind of all of it. You know what I mean? I mean, you can deploy, you deploy individual pieces, but especially like right after F5 when you want to deploy it, make sure it works for your development environments. You really want to deploy the whole thing. You know what I mean? And you want it to deploy in the right order, and you don't want to have to do all the configuration. And it's all frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, if you build a .NET Aspire application and you use things like Azure Storage and Service Bus, or if you're using things like Redis and Postgres, for which there are, what are called Azure Container Apps add-ons. We sort of think, Azure Container Apps is really the best place for you to kind of get going when you're deploying Aspire apps. So I'm looking at my screen right now because last night, the last thing I did before I went and watched a movie was deploy something. So you can literally drop out to your command line if you have an Aspire project. You can CD into the root directory of that solution. So if you do an LS, again, PowerShell, if you do an LS and you can see your SLN file, at that directory, you can literally type AZD in it, and the AZD will go out and it will scan your entire directory structure, and it will go, oh, I see a .NET Aspire AppHost project right here. So I'm going to go ahead and assume this is an Aspire project, Aspire solution. I'm going to spider through your source tree, and I'm going to find all the different deployable projects. So your web API projects, your front end projects, your gRPC projects, your worker projects. I'm going to find all those, and I'm going to figure out how they relate to one another. And then I'm going to find all the different things that they reference, like Redis and Postgres and SQL and Cosmos DB. And then I'm going to generate an app, what's called an Aspire manifest, which is literally a JSON file. You'll see all this in the docs. It's like an Aspire manifest that kind of summarizes the entire topology of my app. And the AZD team then picks up that manifest, generates the bicep that you would need to run it. And before they write it to disk, they just go, yeah, you don't need this. And then they just deploy it for you. So your entire deployment experience for a .NET Aspire app is AZD init, AZD up, wait a couple seconds, and you're done.
Wow. Can't get any easier than that.
No,
right?
it's super simple. Now, one of the things we are going to do in Visual Studio, that's kind of my new gig. I'm back over in the Visual Studio team working with Tim Hewer and Syed and a bunch of folks who build out, the .NET tooling. Like I said, we've collaborated pretty deeply with the AZD team. We're going to be making a deeper investment into the AZD deployment, goodness. Definitely for .NET Aspire, we're going to be kind of setting the deployment experience on top of AZD. What I'd like to have is so you could, if you have a couple of different AZD environments already in your command line, you'll see those inside of ES and you'll be able to pick which one and party I'm also hoping if you like flip from your dev environment to your staging environment, then you could flip back out to the CLI and you'd be deploying to your staging environment. So at least you have that consistency.
Yeah.
Because I like to use the CLI. I'm one of those weird people. So,
yeah. I'm the other way. I like to use the GUI, right?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, once I get it working, I'll send you, I'll get on the horn with you and we'll talk. And we'll see if
Yeah. So, first I want to say, everybody out there, if you have questions, please type them into the chat so we can get Brady to ask them for you. When you were talking about that, there was one point that it really reminded me of, like when ASP.NET 2 came out, right? Because the ASP.NET team between version 1.1 and 2, kind of looked at all the pain points, that we had to deal with as developers in developing websites, not only security, but, deployment, all kinds of other things. And they kind of wrapped it up really to make it super easy for us to do in ASP.NET 2. So with that said, and the other thing I want to say is, if all of you are new to the cloud, one of the hardest things I've found with the cloud is orchestration, right? And that to me is especially orchestration between services and things like that. Yep. And so kind of thinking about that, and I'll admit that some of these questions came from Bard, because that's Simon recommended that I have questions to ask my guests. So now I'm using AI to generate the questions because I'm just too lazy. So how does ASP.NET Aspire compare to orchestration or cloud native development tools like Kubernetes or Dapper?
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's a fantastic question. So one of the things that we did was we worked on a layer inside of .NET. There's actually a tool that essentially emulates a lot of those Kubernetes APIs. When you hit F5, that's kind of what we're running everything inside of. So I just dropped a link into the chat, the public chat on the .NET Aspire orchestration overview, and that's kind of where we actually talk about the different components, such as the app model. Which, in the app model, we've got things like a project resource, which is when you can reference, you can actually set references to web projects from that AppHost project. Mm-hmm. So the idea there is it knows where all these projects are at on disk, and it knows what their URLs are. So it can basically inject, the AppHost will actually inject environment variables into each one of the projects that has a service reference to one of those projects, so that it knows how to find it. If you were to look in the docs, or when you hit F5 in Aspire projects, there's a little tab next to each resource, like a project or a container, that says environment variables. When you click on that environment variable, especially for one, like let's say you have a front end project that has a service reference to two back ends, you'll actually see environment variables. Let's say one of those back ends is checkout. You'll see services _checkout _0 and 1. There's two different environment variables. One's the internal address, one's the public address that you can get into it.
Yeah. All
that exists so that you don't have to write all that YAML, so that you don't have to set up Kubernetes or reset Kubernetes, so that you don't have to do things like turn on port forwarding. You don't have to do any of that stuff. Essentially, what we're doing is we have a Kubernetes-like environment in which .NET Aspire applications run locally on disk, that emulates the same environment in which they're going to run both in Kubernetes or in Azure Container Apps or in some other environment. If you wanted to run this, say, on your Windows machine, you'd actually run it inside of the AppHost. So you do have that capability. But you can also use, this is pretty cool, right after we shipped the preview, a community member got involved with the team and wrote we actually documented this in the tool, in the docs, a tool called Aspirate, which he actually looks at that app model and generates all the Kubernetes isms, so that you can deploy an Aspire application directly into a Kubernetes instance. So you can use this open source tool that a community member wrote. Thank you for that. Yeah. And we collaborated with it. But like I said, it's called Aspirate. You can go directly into Kubernetes. So the idea behind Aspire is like a C# view of that whole orchestrated environment. It's like and again, if you scroll down in the doc that I just shared, you look at the AppHost project, you'll see when you look at that, to me, this code block is almost like thinking about an application inside of a Kubernetes cluster, just in the in that program CS file. And it's actually what the AppHost does.
So you talked a lot about the orchestration of just dealing with getting it up in the cloud and things like that. How about the orchestration? Does Aspire help with orchestration? Like I talked about a little bit ago about, orchestrating, services themselves and things like that. Like what I'm thinking about is more the orchestration of like durable functions do, right?
Okay.
And so does Aspire do anything with like to help you with those kind of things?
Okay, so that's durable functions is really when you're getting into like workflow processing and like those kinds of things. We are investigating ways that we can build something like that on top of Aspire. Ruben Bond and I, last time I was here, we were talking a lot about Orleans. Ruben has actually investigated ways to kind of, like if you think about the eShop on containers sample, we started looking through the code for that, and a lot of the code in that sample and a lot of the code that we actually see people writing in their own applications, very similar to the eShop code, is to enforce resiliency. So I send a message, it has to go from this machine to that machine, then it has to be processed, then it has to go from here to there. If an error happens anywhere in that chain, like this whole thing should fall down. Or not fall down, just that one process, that sub process.
Right.
So that's something that we actually have looked at. We've talked about the idea of something like a durable task inside of our framework. We don't have anything iced yet. We have a couple prototypes of what it would look like. We've been collaborating deeply with the durable functions team. We talked a lot to Chris Gemmell about it and some of the other folks on the team. We haven't built anything yet. Just prototyping. We've also talked a little bit about new ways of doing APIs and events. But with Aspire, with an Aspire spin on it, we had to get all that plumbing right first. Like getting you the ability to, prescriptively start dialing in things like Redis, prescriptively dial in things like, Azure Storage and Azure Queues and yada, yada, yada. We wanted to make sure we had those opinions right first. Those abstractions come later.
So the other thing was I wanted to ask about that was what are the current limitations of Aspire in the preview phase? Or are there any limitations, or I guess maybe things that I don't know. You can answer that.
Well, that's a great question. From a limitations perspective, I would say like you're not going to be able to deploy it everywhere. I'm actually opening up all the different things here. You can't deploy it everywhere. Like we have, Azure Container Apps first was, definitely an important thing because that containerized pass enables us to do a lot of really cool things that we couldn't do before. If you think about deploying the app service, you have to set up a VNet and like some of the other things. The app service is a fantastic hosting place for, your web applications. But it is a little more complicated for folks when they want to kind of set up your microservice type of apps. So that's kind of the gap that we are trying to fill with Aspire and, Azure Container Apps. We have a deep partnership with those folks as well. I would imagine in the future, we're going to need to support folks who want to deploy to, different paths like, app service. I'd like to be able to have, a couple of background services running in Container Apps, a couple of front-end services running in Azure, App Service. That'd be really cool, to have something like that. I don't know what the cards hold for that. We're just really trying to make sure we get all the baseline components and stuff ready. One of the limitations is we made an active decision with Aspire to curate all of the components. So you could go out and you could write an Aspire component like we talked to the Dapper team. The Dapper team started looking at Aspire and they started working on the Dapper component for Aspire to make it easier for people to run Aspire applications, complementing with Dapper. We're not just going to like start to put those out there in NuGet package land and just like say party on it. That's not what we're going to do. We're trying to curate those and have those kind of contributed back to the main Aspire stack because we want to make sure that things like telemetry and resiliency and health checkery and all those conventions that we want to make sure are implemented to spec. So we're taking that part a little bit more seriously. So I would imagine, that means resources, that means maintenance, that means code reviews, et cetera, et cetera. That means deeper partnerships. We've talked to other companies in the industry that think they want to contribute. So we are looking at, things outside the Azure ecosystem, and we want to make sure people that want to do cloud native .NET can, dial in any of those cloud native services that they want to use. So right now, it's our limitation is we don't have a lot of components. We're like close to 20, but we hope to have more and more and more as we move forward.
Do you have a projected go live date that you can share? I know a lot of times you can't share these things, but
beyond what's been shared publicly, I mean, like we're in preview 3 right now. We try to do less than a dozen previews. I mean, you can think we're doing a preview a month. What happens, in spring. So we're kind of hoping to align with some of those dates. We don't, we're being careful about committing to a date versus committing to a mission. We want dotNetAspire to make cloud native development easier for .NET devs and to make it joyful. You know what I mean? And we're not going to stop until we get there. We're more interested in those click stops and visions of perfection. But we're going to try really hard not to let perfect be the enemy of good.
So does Aspire cost? Do you have to pay for Aspire? Is it just you just pay for the normal Azure services and that's it?
Right. It's just it's a part of .NET. It's .NET Aspire. The development experience is currently better in Visual Studio. We've definitely prioritized the Visual Studio experience because we have a couple of niceties there that we don't have in other places. But we are going to be doing a lot of VS Code work as well. There's already some of the experiences in VS Code, but we want to smooth that out. But again, anybody who thinks that there's like this legion of people working on it, it's not true. There's like a bajillion little startups inside of Microsoft.
I know.
There's not a lot of people working on it. So,
well, when you get around to thinking about more of the orchestration of the microservices and things like that, if you need somebody on your panel, let me know because for me, like I was saying, the first like real cloud app I did, I unfortunately had to do it in AWS and I had to do so much work to just orchestrate the eventing and the messages and all this stuff. And towards the end, when we were getting into testing, and not that I could have used Azure anyway, because companies are usually one way or the other. Right towards the end of that is when I started, when .NET, I don't know if they came out with durable functions or they were in preview or whatever, but I saw durable functions. I go, oh my gosh, that would have saved me so much work if I just had that, right? And so that's, at least for me, that's with a lot of companies. I mean, we've all heard the numbers of the number of microservices like Uber uses and things like that, and every time I hear those numbers, I go, oh my God. How do you manage that? Right? It's such a big management task to manage those things and to know when things aren't working and how things are communicating properly or improperly and the performance and all that. So,
I would say the one thing, like you asked about challenges, and I hate to bring up complicated topics in .NET, but there's this awesome feature of app service, Windows specifically. There's this thing in .NET called data protection, and the idea behind data protection is it does that. It encrypts and decrypts. There's a lot of stuff in .NET, especially ASP.NET, that's built on top of data protection. So things like forms, anti-forgery, session states, cookies. So anything that sits on top of any of that, like identity, yada 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 yada. There's a lot of things that sit on top of this layer called data protection. And when you're running on Windows, it's a lot more automatic. There's a couple of APIs that just kind of work. And when you're running your ASP.NET Core application on App Service Windows, there's a lot of stuff that just works as well. When you move to containers, you're talking about like transient storage, virtual file systems, things go away quickly.
Right.
Pods go out, poof, they're gone.
Right.
And a lot of times in those kinds of scenarios, you can't always guarantee HTTP request number 2 is going to hit the same server that HTTP request number 1 hit. And when that happens, bad things can happen.
Right, right.
So what I would encourage everybody out there to do is first, try to understand that there's this thing in ASP.NET and .NET Core called data protection. If you scale out your application horizontally and something weird happens, go look at that first. Go look at data protection first, because data protection sort of requires that you centralize your key storage. So that if you hit machine A and then machine B and then machine 39, the keys are the same, in the background.
Right.
So I would definitely encourage folks to look at that, because in a containerized environment, it doesn't matter how fast it runs. If you hit the wrong server, or if that pod goes out, or insert chaos here, data protection can bite you. So I would definitely encourage everybody just kind of know what that is. We have some docs out there on how to scale ASP.NET Core out in those environments. Just take a look at that. Just kind of learn that. Make that something you always ask yourself: do we have data protection configured properly? Yeah. We're going to make that easier for you long term, but it's obviously a very, very important topic that we have to get right. Key storage is kind of important. Yeah. So, that's something we want to get right for you and make easier. But between now and the time I get what I want, which is that easy, try to remember data protection can bite you, and be careful with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And know how to configure it, please.
Yeah. So you talked, and we're getting short on time already, unfortunately, but and nobody has any questions. I can't believe nobody has questions. Come on, Mark. You don't have a question? Mark's my friend. Mark's the guy who plays lead guitar in the song in the beginning. Nice. And what was I going to ask? So you talked a lot about what you like in Aspire, and so what's maybe something on the roadmap that maybe might not be in the first release that you are looking forward to?
I hope that
you can talk about.
Yeah. AI.
AI. Yeah.
AI is not easy, period.
No.
And I would like for us eventually to find a way to kind of simplify some of the cloudier parts. And like, AI itself is hard. AI in the cloud is harder. So what I'm hoping is that we can find a way to streamline the on-ramp experience for developers who want to use, AI in the cloud with Aspire. That is something that I'm hoping we can do in time for GA. I'm not making any promises because it's hard. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you I want Aspire to make AI easy, because Aspire and AI are two different. They're just like basketball and football.
Right.
But what I hope we can do is make at least the connectivity part of that a little bit easier.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, Aspire sounds like, yet another, I guess, evolution in developer productivity, in the .NET, in the, Microsoft .NET team.
Yep.
I mean, the .NET world, at Azure world. And so, I'm really glad that, Microsoft is tackling big things like this. And I really liked your comment. I'll go back a little bit. I really liked your comment where, we're not really going towards a date. We're going towards, making sure it's right when we release it. I forget exactly what you said, but that's something I really like, because, a lot of times, in Microsoft and other companies too, they put out something that kind of works, but not, and, doesn't fulfill even close to the number of needs that the developers really want. And developers look at it and they go, well, okay, that doesn't work. So I'll have to figure something else out, or go on to the next, framework or something like that. And so, this is the thing with programming. We all know how programming works, and dates and things like that. And dates, have ruined more releases than I've ever seen. Right. Oh, yeah. And instead of just waiting a little bit more and maybe doing it a little bit better, before release. And so I'm glad you guys are taking the time and doing that, and trying to get it at least almost right the first time, and really delivering something that people can really use right out of the box, instead of, struggling with it and just giving up like a lot of people do. Yeah.
That's true. Your book about coding standards and code style. I just looked over here, and there's a Twitter conversation with me and a good friend of mine and another good friend of mine named David Pine. If you haven't had David Pine on your show, I'd love to talk about coding standards and coding styles. His code is beautiful. I've said this before on your show. I think it'd be cool to have y'all just talk about code prettiness.
Yeah, pretty code. And then, I hate to talk about that sometimes just because people go, oh, well, you're trying to be a perfectionist and all that. And, and the thing is, I'm not trying to be a perfectionist. One of my main goals, especially as the level that I am at now, right? I want to make sure whatever I'm writing can be understood by beginners, right? Yeah, I might have to handhold them a little bit, right? But, I want to, I totally believe in the KISS principle, right? And you need to keep it simple because the more complex it is, the more difficult it will take for people to learn and is the more difficult to make modifications, right? And that's the whole thing, behind, things like, style cop and things like that is to make things look consistent, look at the same way to make these changes. And I've been on projects like the last one I remember was Verizon when I architected a new solution for Verizon. And, after we released and the junior developer that I was mentoring had to go back and make changes, she contacted me and said, Dave, oh my God, it is so easy to make changes to this application. I go, yes, that's exactly the way it's supposed to be. Right? Yeah. It's supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to be a death march, just to make a freaking little change to an application, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, coding standards and making things look pretty, I will always admit I spend more time on making my code look pretty.
Yeah.
But I do that for two reasons. The main reason is so junior developers, and almost any developer can understand what I wrote. And number two is, because I write books and have the show and blog sites and, I want to make sure I'm always putting the best example out there that I can, right? Because, the problem with bad examples is people start propagating that everywhere, right? And I see this in code bases where, someone got a hold of one bad example and it's all over the whole entire project, right?
Yeah.
And
the thing about that I used to love, and I love doing this at Microsoft, is there's a lot of different personalities in any team, like especially big company like Microsoft. But and this probably goes right in the face of what you're saying, but what I've really enjoyed are those moments where you're looking at somebody's like, hey, could you help me with foo code? And you're looking at the code, and you kind of have this moment where you're like, did Stefan write this? Or did so-and-so write this? Or
right, you try to figure it out. Yeah.
And they go, yeah. And you go, okay. Like, I know where to look now, and it's like knowing that person and wrote that code, like everybody has like a couple things that they do differently. And sometimes I feel like it's forensic. It's like, if this person wrote it, you need to look for the word designer somewhere or builder or whatever, you know what I mean? And once you find that, like, you're in the right spot.
Yeah.
That part's always fun for me. But it does mean that the code is only as understandable as the personalities on the team.
Yeah. Well, the good thing, at least, we can figure that out. It's not, you can't instantly, well, now you can instantly figure it out with Visual Studio because Visual Studio tells you,
blames,
who's the last person who worked on this code and stuff, right? And if you follow for example, the style cop rules of documenting, the header of the class file, you're supposed to put in there the last person who worked on it, and things like that. So
that's true.
Yeah, but also with that, developers are so transitory that even if you know who did it, they're probably not around anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Exactly. That's true. That's very true. They're all nomads.
Yeah. It's different in Microsoft because you guys usually work there for a long time, but anyway, I want to say thanks so much for being on the show and talking about Aspire. I'm really interested in learning it, and I definitely am going to start looking into it. And if you need help with the direction, please let me know. I'm always available, especially since I'm a Microsoft MVP. And And I'm not going. And you're always welcome to come back on whenever you want. Just let me know. I'm not hanging out after the show, like I said, because I got to take off to band practice.
Do you have anybody big for the 100th? Or is that a secret?
The what?
Do you have anybody big for the 100th, or is that a secret?
No, because it's no. I don't have anybody big for the 100th. Yeah, I was kind of going to do that, but then I don't know. I just forgot. And now I already have somebody booked, and so
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I should do that. I definitely will do something special. That's for sure.
That'll be fun.
But yeah, hitting 100 shows.
Intense.
It's a lot of shows. I mean, I feel bad sometimes because I forget sometimes who's been on the show. I've had so many guests, right? And I have to go back and look. Did I invite them already? And so, speaking of that, this is your second time. So the question I ask all my guests the second time they're on the show, I'm going to have to come up with a third one because some people are coming on 3 and 4 times now.
Actually, this is my third. This is my third.
Oh, this is your third.
My third, yeah.
Oh, see. So if I asked you this last time, let me know. But otherwise, what brings you happiness in your tech career?
What brings me happiness in my tech career? I have a new answer this year. Over the last year, I've had a great opportunity where a couple of people have said, like, you know how it's always hard to like tell if somebody's compliment's genuine or not. The one that I've really enjoyed, like really believing is the phrase, "You are a true ally." I think that, like, being an ally to people is like the best compliment. Like when people feel that they can come and they can talk to you and like really open up and be like, why does this dev not like it when I do this, or blah blah blah. Like that's always great. That's always great.
Yeah.
So that's my new answer.
And especially in this controversial world that we live in right now, and software engineering has always been kind of controversial and that's good, right? Because that's how you bring out different ideas and things like that. So, but yeah, I like that quote. That's very nice. I like it.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'll be hitting you up when I want to do some more work to that song. Okay. And I'd love to have you play like I said, a Deep Purple distorted organ on it.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah. All right.
That's actually the patch I have right now. Is pretty gravelly. So
yeah. Well, cool. I was thinking this morning I should probably make sure I do that update before season 5 starts in October. So
that'd be great. Yeah. Let me know.
Yeah, I will. Cool, well, thanks so much for being on the show. I hope you have a rest of a great weekend. Have fun hacking with your sons, and I'll see you next time.
Cool. Y'all take care.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, that was really fun. I learned a lot about NetAspire, and I always really enjoy talking to Brady. He's a great guy, not only because he's a musician, but he's just a nice guy, and very, very knowledgeable. And so I'm going to have to, I think this is one of those shows I'm going to have to go back and look. And I don't typically rewatch my shows, but I think I'm going to have to rewatch this one because there's so much great information in it. So let's move on so I can get to band practice and get out of here. So one of the things I've been working on now that my coding standards book is out, I'm now working on updating performance metrics for .NET 8. So I've been doing work almost literally every day on updating articles and writing brand new articles about the performance things I'm seeing in .NET 8. Most all good. I have to say I'm really impressed with the dramatic performance increase that .NET 8 has brought to us developers. And so I've been working super hard on this. If you follow me on Twitter, which I hope you do, I'm almost literally releasing updated and new articles every day for the next couple months. And so please check out my Twitter feed. Also, you can go to that URL there to where I have all of my performance articles. There's quite a lot of them. And there's going to be even more. So I hope you go check that out. And if you're wondering about the best way to do things in .NET 8, I hope you'll check that out because, like I said, I'm working as fast as I can to get those metrics up there for you all. So Hope you check it out. Here's my geek humor today. We were talking, this picture, Brady was just saying something a couple minutes ago, kind of reminded me of this. Geek humor, client requirements and code base after handling all scenarios. This is so true. I've been on so many projects like this, and it just becomes a big spaghetti mess of something you can't change. And so, I was talking a little bit ago about the KISS principle, keeping things simple. Please do that when you're architecting and writing code, because otherwise you'll be left with what you see on the right-hand side there. Crazy. Anyway, as every week, please help me help the kids in the slums in Delhi, India, by going and right now and donating whatever you can forward to the voiceofslum.org. These are pictures and videos from when I was there last time, where Joe and I brought them 5 computers. The kids sang to us and did poetry, and I hung out with the kids, and I hung out with Dave and Chandy, the 2 people who run Voice of Slum, who are just those 2 just really inspire me, and the kids there really need your help. If you've never been in a Delhi slum, you'll know what I mean. So please donate whatever you can, whatever that is. And most of us all have ability to do that. So I hope you go to voiceofslum.org right now and go help the kids. All right. Thanks for watching. I have another Microsoft person on the next show in a couple weeks, February 2nd. Jared Parsons will be back on the show. So I'm looking forward to having Jared back on. Super excited about that. Also, help your fellow humans by donating blood this weekend, please. America is experiencing a emergency blood shortage right now. And so please go spend 30 minutes of your time and go donate a pint of blood, because your fellow human really needs it. And speaking of donating blood, I will be doing my long 2-hour donation tomorrow. And I was on the website, the blood bank website this morning, and I kind of wanted to share, because I didn't even really know this. At least the times I've been donating at the San Diego Blood Bank, I've now donated 85 times to the blood bank. I didn't know I've donated so many dang times. And tomorrow I'll be over 18 gallons of donations. And so all I want is for those of you who've never done this, go do it just once. It will make you feel so much better as a human, and it will make me feel good that I've been able to inspire you to do that. Speaking of inspiration. All right, well, thank you so much. I'll see you in a couple weeks. Make sure you email suggestions, including who you want me to ask on the show or topics for the show. Please email me at dotNetDave@live.com. And with that, I'll see you on February 2nd.